During a school field trip, a young man by the name of Peter Parker is bitten by an irradiated spider, turning him into the Amazing Spider Man. Armed with enhanced agility and reflexes and precognitive sense for danger, called the spider sense, and the proportionate strength of a spider, Spider Man battles crime in New York City, ranging from the lowliest street thug to the superpowered menaces. Welcome back to Legends and Lore. I'm Renezuo here with my fellow lore keeper, Tom Sweeney, and today we're talking about Peter Parker, the Amazing Spider Man, which won our poll this past week on Twitter. It's worth calling him the Amazing Spider Man for the purposes of this episode because of how many Spider Men there are. When we say Amazing Spider Man, we're typically referring to the Spider Man that exists within the 616 universe. Even that one itself is a pretty vast topic with a very long timeline. So we're going to get into it with a little bit more organization than we might have had with a lesser storied character, and
Yeah.
because he goes back to when was the debut?
1963, if I'm not mistaken, or 1964, in Amazing Fantasy number 15 by Steve Ditko and Stan Lee.
Wow,
Yes.
that's
Yes. That
yeah, it's
is the tip of the iceberg. Actually, no, 1962, actually. That
1962.
far back. He got his own comic series as the Amazing Spider-Man himself in 1963, if I'm not mistaken.
Oh, okay, that makes it so. Amazing Fantasy first, and then
Mm-hmm.
I don't know why I had the number Amazing Fantasy 11 in my.
His was 15, definitely. I have a non actual first edition copy. That was like the first comic I really cared about acquiring in my life.
What was the first Spider-Man comic you ever had?
My first Spider-Man comic, was my first one that I owned myself, was Spider-Man. I think it was Spider-Man Civil War issue 2.
Hmm.
That was the first one I owned personally. But I read a ton of them throughout my life. But that was the first
Yeah,
one I read that was like, oh, this is my comic book for Spider-Man. And
yeah,
it was a pretty confusing point to be a fan of Spider-Man,
yeah.
but
Jumping into the deep end right
I
there.
was like, I'm happy I own this. I no longer have it, unfortunately. I'm a terrible fan, but
Yeah, I don't have my first one either.
that got left behind when I moved like my first time. But
Yeah,
it's
mine is still somewhere in my dad's house. I haven't been able to find it. I want to find it because my dad gave it to me when I was a kid, and it is the first appearance of the Punisher.
oh, he did first appear in Spider-Man. Yes, he did. He was trying to
Yeah,
kill Spider-Man because I think it was the death of Jean DeWolf, actually, if I'm not mistaken.
it's a pretty valuable it's a pretty valuable comic, and I know it's probably not in any kind of good condition because I mean it was a kid's comic book.
That's
I did
true.
not take care of the shit, but it would be kind of cool just to have it and be like, hey, look what I got,
Yeah,
because yeah.
I would love to have all my so this is gonna make you really angry, but my the first figurine I was given when I moved from New York by my uncle. My uncle was the person that introduced me to comic books and nerddom in general.
Hmm.
The thing he gave me was he had a Todd McFarlane of like first edition Spider-Man figurine where it was Spider-Man. He was doing like the squat pose with
Hmm.
a black costume. The one that really famous McFarlane picture. It's
Yeah.
super famous. That thing is worth thousands of dollars now, and I broke it on the move upstate. Broke it, and my uncle was just like, "I'm not even mad," because he didn't know how much it cost. He was just giving me a gift because he knew I loved it.
Yeah.
And then I found out how much it cost later on, and I was like, "I'm so stupid."
I had a English teacher in high school who lost a first edition of that Amazing Fantasy comic you were talking about.
Oh no!
He didn't like there was a flood at his house, and it was in a box that got basically drowned with a bunch of other old comics. And he said it's like every other day he thinks about that comic. It's like, that's rough, man. This guy was like in his 60s or 70s at the
Oh
time, and
my
I'm like,
God, he's already old. He's
oh
still
man.
sad about it.
And he's still thinking about it like
That's going
every
to
other day.
linger. That's going to follow him to the grave. That's
Yeah.
unfortunate.
The last thought that goes through his head as he slips into the abyss.
Is gosh darn it, I had Amazing Fantasy number 15, and then Finn, the curtain drops on his life.
Oh man.
That's so
Uh, so,
terrible.
so when we're talking about beginnings, the origins of specifically Peter's powers are different
Hmm.
depending on the story that you go through, but the 616 version of him has had a few retcons on the nature
His
of his
powers,
powers.
yes.
Now, originally, they did the whole radioactive spider bite thing because that was during the period where every superhero was getting their powers from radiation and other things like that, gamma rays. It was a kind of a poorly understood science, so they went
Yeah,
crazy with the
we didn't
science fiction
know
on it.
what we didn't know how bad radiation was for the for the human body yet. So everybody
Yeah,
was like, "Oh, radiation will definitely make people cool and stuff." And I I mourn for the people that were like, "What? I work at a power plant. Like I could get like some ambient radiation waves. Like whatever. I'll just do that."
it'll be fine.
And then turned into tumors with skeletons. So I'm really sorry
Yeah.
for anyone who lost anyone like that, but Spider-Man, similar to another group of people that premiered the same year, if I'm not mistaken, the Fantastic Four,
Mm-hmm.
also received his powers through radiation, just like another fellow Marvel character, Ben Grimm. And I could
Mm-hmm.
probably go on, if I'm not mistaken. Who else has their powers from radiation? Not Ben Grimm, the
There's
Fantastic Four in total, not just Ben Grimm by himself.
Yeah, they got the cosmic radiation.
Mm-hmm.
The Hulk has his from the gamma
Hulk.
rays.
And I
Uh,
think that's anyone else?
I'm trying to think of standalone characters that were created around that time. Like I know a lot of them. A lot of them do have their powers derived from that.
I know
Um,
the 60s were X-Men, Hulk, um Iron Man was already created by the 60s, right? He's not a 60, or Captain America technically too, radiation as well.
oh yeah, the Vita rays.
Yeah. That people don't know about. And
Yeah,
everyone's like, that didn't happen. I'm like, yes, that did.
yeah,
It
that's the thing.
wasn't just a serum.
They even put it in the movie. It's there.
Yeah. It's yes,
it's
it did. He got his he was radiated after he drank that potion.
mhm. So,
But
when it comes to that radioactive spider bite, I know it was I want to say it was the early 2000s or something, where they get
mhm,
into the idea that it wasn't that it was an irradiated spider that
mhm.
granted powers. It was an irradiated spider that was trying to uh, gift powers before it died from the radiation.
Yeah, it
So,
was a magical spider that was radiated.
yeah, He was
And
he was honest. Imagine being the spider and being like tasked by this astral entity, the Weaver, right? It's like,
yes.
yo, I need you to bring these powers to Peter Parker. And the spider's like, I got it, boss. I'm on it. And he chooses a path directly through the radiation beam. And he's like, fuck.
God damn, I got like 20 minutes. I got like 20 minutes before I'm fucking out.
That kid's all the way across the room. This is
I'm a
gonna be cutting it
spider.
close.
I can move at spider speed. That's not fast. I'm not like a roach or something. But yes, Spider-Man's power origin is said to be either magical. During J. Miles Straczynski's, I keep having pronounce his last name, Straczynski.
Straczynski, yeah.
Yes, during his run within the period of the early 2000s, we figure out that Peter Parker may have had a mystical background opposed to a very typical science fiction one, due to a big plot involving the inheritors, which we will get into a little later on.
Yeah,
But
yeah,
we're
it's
pretty much talking about the origin. So,
yeah.
uh,
So, how do you feel? Would you have preferred it stay as a radioactive spider, or do you like the kind of mystic origin twist?
Um, to be fair, I am more of a mystical fan, but when it comes to Spider-Man, I like the science fiction one more of him
Mm-hmm.
because simply because it made Peter unique. It could have been anybody. That's what I liked about it at first. It could have been
Mm-hmm.
anyone that got bitten by a spider, but Peter got bit, and since Peter got bit, he became the one that became Spider-Man.
Yeah,
But
I normally have an aversion to the kind of like chosen one narrative, but in this case, I like Peter a lot, so I was like, all right,
Peter, the thing about Peter is that he's not a chosen one. That's what makes it even better. He was
yeah.
the one that got chosen, but he was not fated at first. He
Who was
wasn't
fated
fated.
for?
It wasn't fated for anybody. It was just chance.
Okay.
By chance, it landed on his hand, and by chance, he became the hero of the people, which is really genuinely cool. But then years later, after Original Sin, you find out that the spider did not only bite Peter Parker, but Cindy Moon Silk was also bit. So
Mm.
that is something else for another story that we'll probably go into a sub story about all the spiders. Make an
Yeah.
episode called Spiders
Oh yeah.
Galore.
Yeah, the whole spider family.
Yeah,
I got a few of them in there that I really like.
yeah.
Um,
I have two in the spider family that I'm like, these are my go tos.
yeah.
Would you consider Flash Thompson Anti Venom a part of the spider family?
I think so. I
So
mean,
Venom
he's
is too then?
yeah, I would say Venom is.
Okay. All right.
I would say so because I mean Venom, even though he doesn't necessarily have his powers from Spider-Man, a lot of his iconography and his style and everything is derived from Spider-Man. And in the
Mm-hmm.
80s and 90s, he was definitely treated as like Spider-Man's dark other, you know.
Yeah.
So I'd say he gets a pass into the Spider family
Okay.
because of that.
I would say Venom gets it. I would say Venom gets it. Maybe not so much now because of the work that Donny Cates has done and making Venom like very much so just like his own character,
Mhm.
which I adore. I think Venom's storyline is probably one of the best in modern comics. I think it's like that is a textbook way to fix a character that was like had all these dumb tropes on him
Yeah, he's
and
very
just
much his own thing now.
transform him into like, oh, this is like a brand like Venom comics were like some of the most highly sold comics out of Marvel like the last 3 years, and it's Venom, and I was like, what are we talking
That's
about?
that's impressive.
Which is insane because like though comic book sales aren't what they used to be, they still sell pretty decently well.
Mhm.
And the fact that the biggest one there was Venom was truly an exciting fucking time for me.
Yeah, and I think it would be foolish of them to measure a successful story only by measuring it against like how comics used to sell because that was a different time. You know,
A different animal, yeah.
you're never going back to the gold or silver age or anything like that. It's never
hmm
happened.
We had a second
Um,
Silver Age, but then it petered out because of them just again Marvel spreading themselves, Marvel and DC and them spreading themselves way too thin, way
yeah,
too fast. But I appreciate comics where they are right now.
I like the mystical origins of Spider-Man, but I was reading Spider-Man for a long time. Straczynski comes along, brings in this kind of mystical twist, and I feel like we got a lot of like fresh air breathed into the character for during his like it was like we're gonna do something a little different with him, but we're not gonna change like who he is at his core. You know, we're just gonna kind of like change some background details and see how it works, which
Mm,
brings us to the next part that I want to talk about, which is kind of Spider-Man's personality, but not just as a single person, but how he behaves when he's Peter and how he behaves when he's Spider-Man, and what traits apply to both.
okay, well, when I would talk about Peter Parker is the meek nerd who has the heart of gold and always wants to help, but is just incapable of not messing up. He just every time he messes up, I would say there's always extreme ramifications. Like the Parker luck is a thing that I even say outside of like comic books
Yeah.
because every time Peter indulges himself, lo and behold, something bad will happen.
Hmm.
He can't help it.
Yeah. Anytime it's something for him, that's when it turns sideways. He could be doing stuff for other people nonstop, and he'll get a reasonable rate of success. But as soon as he does something for himself, that's when it goes to shit, and then you get into that Peter Parker self-loathing and guilt. because
Yep.
he does have that trait. You know, he's very much kind of like um I don't want to necessarily say self-loathing and leave it at that, but he does beat himself up a lot for just
Peter
wanting things, you
Peter
know.
is the classic kind of character who he trips, he falls, and he stays down for a little bit and cries. He's one of those guys. Like I love Peter. Look, this episode, I'm smiling when I'm talking about this. How much I
Yeah.
love Spider-Man. I'm grinning ear to ear. But when I think of Spider-Man, Spider-Man is absolutely a fucking bitch. He is Peter is absolutely a bitch who would like cry about something sad. But the thing that makes him such a prevalent and awesome character is that he always tries to do the right thing and he never gives up trying to do the right thing.
Yeah. And I think that was kind of an interesting thing that they picked out for Into the Spider-Verse as being sort of a trait of the Spider
Hmm.
People in general, is that they just keep getting back up, you know. And
Yeah.
I was like, you know, that's true, and I hadn't really thought of that, and I really like that they picked that out
Yeah,
and were
that's my
like,
that is my favorite trait of Spider-Man, and it's also shared between Spider-Man and his biggest hero. And no, it's not Tony Stark, it's actually Captain America.
yeah,
Because Spider-Man's biggest hero, contrary to what the MCU would let you to believe, is Captain America. He's always looked up to him and aspired him the most.
mm-hmm.
So I
Yeah,
really like. Hmm?
the MCU is interesting, kind of like diverging path to Spider-Man, and I like it. But I people who haven't read like a lot of the comics and haven't had those moments between Spider-Man and Cap, like during Civil War when Spider-Man fights Cap for the first time, and it's like 11 seconds, and Cap basically has Peter dead to rights. You know, it's like
Yeah,
11 seconds into the fight. His arm is basically immobilized. He's staggered. He's he's already a little punch drunk, and Cap hasn't even like he's not even breathing hard. You
yeah.
know?
He threw the shield. It was such an amazing because Spider Man's in a spider armor, so he's already enhanced from having armor suit on, and he's like, Peter is just like, all right, well, you know, I'm smart, obviously, and I'm faster and stronger than Captain America, so this should be easy. And Cap was like, hey, kid, get out of here. You don't want any problem with this. And he fights him, and Spider Man is like, because before I go on a Captain America fanboy thing, because I'm also a huge fan of Captain America. Um, you got to understand that he's more than a serum. That's the thing about Steve Rogers
Mhm.
entirely. Same as Spider Man. Peter Parker is more than just the cowl. Spider Man.
Yeah,
That's what makes Spider Man's character so beautiful. Because let's say a character like let's say Bruce Wayne, right?
yeah,
Bruce Wayne is Bruce is barely a character. The main character is Batman. You
right,
know. But when it comes to Spider Man and Peter Parker, so often I refer to Spider-Man 616, the Amazing Spider-Man, as Peter because his character in his suit and it's outside of his suit are so important for who he is.
right.
He's not
He,
just simply the guy in the suit or the guy outside the suit. He's very much so both of those people.
yeah, yeah. And when he puts on the suit, you know, he gets a little more confident.
Hmm.
He cracks wise a little bit more. He's a little more confident, but he's not a totally different person. But it is interesting to see kind of like it's not like the same stark transformation between Superman and Clark Kent, you know,
Hmm.
in terms of how they behave. It's not quite the same, but it's there are some times where Peter is more comfortable being Spider-Man than he is being Peter. And
Yeah, and vice versa.
yeah, he's had moments where he's gone between those things and he's never really fully reconciled that as far as I know.
Hmm. I would
Yeah.
say that Peter Parker's character is well, aside from outside, of this is inside the costume. When I think of inside the costume Spider-Man, I think of one very annoying. Um, it's a huge it's a huge like plot point. Like it's that Spider-Man's annoying. He annoys the shit out of people. He annoys his villains. He annoys people he works with. Everyone is like, I love him, but god damn he won't shut up, or like oh my god he just keeps quipping, or he's so bothersome, and it's just like ah man I love that about him.
I don't know, excuse me, I don't know if it's still like this, but for years on Marvel's website, for the character profiles that they had for each of the characters,
Hmm.
they listed his wit and his quips as one of his special abilities
It
under
is.
under his character profile. They listed that because it's so effective when he has to overcome like superior power and force. He can kind of goad someone into making stupid ass mistakes and over swinging and throwing their weight around in ways that they really don't need to. Like um, I know we're supposed to be sticking with 616, but the one that I think really showed it very well was in Ultimate, because Bendis really plays up the snarkiness that Spider has. Anytime Bendis writes him, he's gonna play that up. And
Hmm.
there's one part where he confronts Kingpin, and he's just reading off fat jokes to Kingpin, off of a piece of paper that he brought with him.
He's such a, and those are the things, like, I think that Bendis is capturing, because I love 616 Spider-Man. That's preferably my favorite out of all the
Mhm.
spiders, even including Miles Morales, who is literally like ethnically a copy of me and grew up in the same area. Like, I love, love Peter Parker, but I like how much Bendis captures the idea of a young Spider-Man in the world he's in. Because I feel like when Spider-Man was particularly the young puppy in in the Marvel universe, those were the kind of stories you were seeing. You weren't seeing Spider-Man have the most like in-depth stories when he was in his early teens, and well, because he was only 16 when he died. He was maybe like Spider-Man for like a year and a half, or maybe almost a year or
Yeah.
two. Maybe he wasn't very old when he died, but it was just the idea of seeing him just go about the world and like interacting with it, and like meeting the X-Men and having girlfriends and going to school and having like an attitude problem. It's like, that's a teenager, that makes sense. And I liked what he did with him.
Yeah. I mean, it's really, and I remember we've talked about this before about like young and old Spider-Man stuff like that. I feel like Bendis covered young Spider-Man so well, even if it was in another universe, that there really isn't a need to go back to young Spider-Man.
I'm
And
so over young Spider-Man, actually.
like
I can't stand him.
I like him and everything, but I liked Spider-Man when he got to college. I like when Spider-Man got finished his degree and then got out into the world. I like that stuff, like adult Peter Parker,
Yeah,
because
I agree.
I yeah, it's interesting, and the problem with a lot of Spider-Man stuff is they keep resetting him to like right when he first gets his powers. And I think the first thing that probably sold me on the MCU Spider-Man was when they were like, "No, we're not going to show you get his powers. We're not going to do the Uncle Ben. We're still doing young Spider-Man, but we're skipping over a lot of stuff so that we can get on with the other stuff." They're like, "We're going to do 4 movies representing, each a year of his high school life, and then we're moving past it. Then we're going to get into the other stuff." All right, well, can we hurry that along? Can we get to that part?
I'm
Because
so over him being the friendly neighborhood child Spider-Man. I want them to
yeah,
because I think that Spider-Man's character truly rings true when he goes through all of the strife he endures,
mm,
like when he loses Gwen Stacy, or when Aunt May almost dies because of a blood transfusion he gives her, or when he finds out that Harry's father is Green Goblin, or like just those moments, or like people hate it. I don't like it very much either, but the Clone Saga leads to Kane, which leads to some crazy moments later on, or even freaking like Venom, literally Venom showing up. Like, it's just, that's not, you can't do that with Kid
yeah.
Spider-Man.
I kind of want to get to the more personal stuff, because right now what they're doing with Spider-Man in the MCU is it's very much each movie is about him. It's not necessarily about it, but there is one aspect of his powers that he sort of learns to master or really get a handle on with each movie. you know and it's like that's great and everything, but he's got kind of a lot of powers, and we're going to be here forever if that's going to be the way we do it,
Yeah, it's like
because
like
he's
he'll
got
get it as he get it. You get it as he gets it.
Yeah,
power wise.
because in 616 he's got the agility, strength, spider sense,
Hmm.
sticking to walls. I don't know if the webbing is still organic, but it used to be web shooters. I don't know if it's still organic though, because I
Oh,
know
quick
in the
question.
other,
How do you feel about the organic webs?
I mean I like organic webs. The reason why they couldn't originally do organic webs makes sense for the time period, because I forget who said it, but when they first came up with the concept, there was like an editor that it shot it down. Was basically saying we're not going to have a teenager running around Manhattan shooting white goo out of his body. Like there's no way. And so they had to change it to web shooters, which was interesting. It's
I
like,
personally love the web shooters. I'm
yeah,
actually a way bigger fan of the web shooters than I am organic webs.
I'm okay with organic webs, but the web shooters offer interesting opportunities that you just don't get with organic webs. You
Hmm.
know,
Not to mention it boosts his intelligence to a
yeah,
significant degree. Because like even when Tony Stark like met him or Reed met him and they talked to him about their website, like this is really impressive that you made this, and it kind of shows off his scientific mind more.
hmm
And I was
yeah,
like, oh, that makes sense. Not to mention that the webs wouldn't come out of his wrist; they would come out of his asshole, if anything. So I was just like, I don't know why people want him. Like I hated the idea of the organic webs in the Raimi movies. I was like, this is stupid.
yeah. And the thing is that they didn't hadn't even decided on it until like very last minute, because in that scene in the fire,
Hmm.
the burning building, and he throws all the razor things at him. He blocks him with his wrists as if he's wearing web shooters, you know.
Mm.
And then after they shot that scene, they're like, "No, we're gonna go organic webs," and then they don't address them. It's kind of weird. So, but yeah, does he still have some of the other powers from the other
So
storyline, like the command over spiders, the
you're talking about the other and the Queen's mutation happened on the same time, if I'm not mistaken. It was like early 2000 Spider-Man where he first got upgraded. Because I guess we might as well go through Peter's proper powers now. But
yeah.
um,
Well,
he
because I know that some things got retconned, but
mhm.
I don't know which of the things got retconned and which did.
So if I'm not mistaken, before Spider-Man had any of his power enhancements, he had super strength. He had proportionate strength and speed, agility, the spider sense, and all that junk. Then he had the ability to shoot organic webs. He got his strength enhanced to before he could lift 10 tons to now he's able to lift 15 tons. And he
Oh,
got the
okay.
enhanced spider sense. And then after that, during the others mutation, he got enhanced even further. So he was able to lift like 20 tons. He got the ability to stick to any surface with any part of his body.
Hmm.
And then he had the rebirth thing where if he got killed, he would turn into Cocoon and then come out a brand new Spider-Man. And I think when one more day happened, that story got retconned, and the new vessel of the other became Kane Parker instead of Peter.
Right.
So
Okay. Yeah.
I'm pretty sure Peter doesn't have the same powers, because I remember he meets Kane later on and he's like, "Holy shit, you're way stronger than me."
Yeah. The I remember that Brand New Day reset a lot of things,
Hmm.
and at the time it was super unclear as to what was reset outside of the Mary Jane thing. You were like,
Hmm.
well, I don't know, like, and they just kind of like let it trickle out as they went. Uh, but yeah, I didn't know if he still could, see in the dark, if he had the
Yeah,
command over spiders.
he lost
Uh,
his night vision and his command over spiders. Unfortunately,
that's unfortunate.
I
I
love
love.
the enhanced power Spider-Man. I loved what he beat the crap out of Morlun. It was amazing to me.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Um, excuse me. I keep having to clear my throat because I don't usually get this much talking in a day. Unless I'm yelling at the kids. That's not quite the same. But
Not quite.
yeah, I really what when it came to his spider sense, they powered it up. To what extent was it powered up?
During the other storyline, if I'm not mistaken, the spider sense was just like it would, because he's always had a ridiculous spider sense. Or before, it would just alert him in proximity of like danger within the proximity. Because I remember, if you read Brand New Day, there was one point where he was going on a dating. He was going on a dating thing, like a rapid round dating thing, and he sat down next to this girl, and his spider sense went off with this girl,
Whoa.
and he got up and left immediately. And I was just like, that is so freaking ridiculous, but I love it. I adore it. It was my favorite moment. I was just like, that's crazy, because a lot of
Spider Sense is like, no, bro, get
this
out.
one is not good. I don't know what it is. This one's not good. But
Yeah,
it was just enhanced for the most part, because it's really hard to literally enhance a power like the spider sense, you know?
yeah, it's one of those things that it's a lot of people who kind of like passively engage with Spider-Man stuff don't realize that that might be like his keystone
That is what
power.
keeps him,
Like
that's what gives him an edge.
it's the cornerstone to everything. None of the
Hmm.
other powers are really as good if you don't have that spider sense. And you can kind of see it when Kane is the Scarlet Spider out in Houston, whatever. He doesn't have a spider sense.
Because he lost connection
So
to the weave. Yeah, I remember that.
yeah, so he ends up taking more hits and getting his ass beat a few more times. Like he's got other powers, like he has those like spike things that they all had
Hmm.
for a little while. He's got the agility, he's got the strength, but without that spider sense, it's a little different. Now Kane is trained in a way that Peter isn't, so it kind of, he doesn't, he's not completely naked out there,
Yeah.
but it's not the same. And as a matter of fact, whenever Peter attempts to acquire fighting training, all it ends up doing is inhibiting his spider sense. You
Because
know?
I remember in actually at Spider Island, the famous
Yeah.
story where Spider-Man loses spider sense, and he, for a little bit of time, he's getting his ass beat. He gets beat up by a mind controlled Spider Woman who's not even at like full power. She beats the shit out of him in front of everybody, and
Hmm.
everyone laughs at him, and they're like, "Dude, you got fucked up by Spider Woman." And she's like, "I'm really sorry. I thought you were like a great fighter." And he was like, it's usually my spider sense that like carries me through the fight." So he goes and actually gets trained by Shang-Chi, funnily
Yeah.
enough, teaches him the way of the spider, his own martial arts style, which is still pretty good. But the thing about Spider-Man's spider sense, well, this is a caveat to spider sense, okay? People don't understand this. And it's just because people are like, how does Spider-Man lose fights if he has a spider sense? The thing about Peter's spider sense is, one, he has to choose to react to things.
Hmm.
He gets the sense, he gets the sensation, and he's like, all right, something might be happening. I have to choose to react to it. So someone's throwing a punch at him, it'll be like, oh, I sense the punch is coming from me ahead of time. I have the ability to be able to move out the way or dodge. But also, Spider-Man can only dodge as fast as he can dodge. So if
Yeah.
you're throwing a punch at him that's fast, he can get out the way, you'll still connect with him. That's people like Captain America and Wolverine, like other superheroes, are able to still tag him up and hit him.
Yeah. And a
It's
lot of
not.
them, a lot of the time is you'll be looking at this panel where he's taking a hit, but they will specifically call out the fact that like, oh man, if it wasn't for my spider sense, I would have taken that hit dead on. You
Yeah.
know, so he turns a lot of like devastating blows from like heavy hitters like Juggernaut home
His
into like
constant fights with Juggernaut.
into just like little glancing blows. You
Yeah,
know,
to save him from being popped like a
yeah,
literal bug. He's
yeah,
able to avoid that. His spider sense, and I would say his agility are his two like things that are like absolutely top notch. When it comes to
yeah,
like agility and balance, Spider-Man is unbelievable. Even people
yeah.
like Daredevil and freaking Captain America, like, yeah, this guy's unbelievably nimble.
Yeah, because his strength and his durability give him, a crazy edge in a fight with, regular criminals and dudes who aren't powered. But once you start getting into like the larger, you know, Marvel universe, and he starts going up against guys, that are a lot stronger and a lot more can take
Like
a lot more
planet
hits than
busting
him.
people.
Yeah,
Like
it's
people like
his.
Thor and Nova and Silver Surfer and all those
Yeah,
like, oh, crazy people.
being able to lift up 10, 15 tons doesn't really matter against those dudes. It's like it's impressive, but it's just to scale, it's not as impressive.
It's he's a bug compared
Yeah.
to the ridiculous ones. I remember there's a whole comic about Spider-Man, because Peter Parker holds back a great deal when he fights.
Oh yeah.
When he's out like corralling up like criminals, he's not going to, with the force he would be able to get a 10-ton car over his head exerting max force. He wouldn't punch a person with
Mm.
that kind of energy because it would kill you. You would just get
Yeah.
hit and you would die.
They talk about how like him being a victim of getting his ass beat as a kid and being bullied and stuff like that gives him sort of a unique sense of like he's the hunter but he's also been the hunted,
Hmm.
so he knows exactly how much to hold back when he's hitting normal people. But when you get someone like Doc Ock who's in his body and just goes full swing,
And
like he
punches the Scorpion's fucking jaw off. Oh my
yeah,
god.
yeah, it's insane. Like there was one instance in, I want to say it was the late 90s, where Spider-Man gets pushed to like the absolute edge and he fights Venom with everything he has. And it was that point where I realized that Spider-Man is stronger than we realized because he's going full swing on Venom, and it's not puny, it's like he's laying him out.
I
And
remember that. That's when they fought on the island, if I'm not mistaken, right?
yeah.
And he was like, "Oh, I can't be Venom." It was like, "Oh, I'm." That storyline is insane because I remember that he fakes his death, right? And Venom's left
Yep.
on an island, and he's like, "All right, I'm leaving. That's it.
Yeah.
I'm done. I'm not doing this anymore."
Yeah, Venom's like, I'm done. I'm not doing any of this stuff. I've taken out Spider-Man. I'm gonna go and do other shit.
Yeah, and he's just like,
And so
and Peter's like, "All right, I'm gone. Let's go. Let's get off this island.
yeah.
That thing is an alien monster. I don't know why I'm fighting it. I'm from Queens."
when Venom comes back out east at some point, he runs into Ben Riley, and Ben Riley and Peter Parker have identical power sets at this time. There's no difference in them, except Ben Riley has better equipment. And when Ben Riley and Venom get into it, Venom gets into this fight thinking, "Oh, it's another Spider-Man. On I can handle this. That's not a problem. I can crush this idiot." And within like a few minutes, he realizes this is not Peter Parker. Like this is another dude. This is because he hits harder. He's got more gadgets. He's more aggressive. He doesn't fight defensively. He goes on the attack. And Ben Riley ends up defeating Venom in that fight.
That's pretty
And
crazy.
yeah, so it's like Ben Riley was an interesting character for the time because they would use him to show what Spider-Man was capable of if he was just a little different. Like, oh, imagine if Peter Parker was angrier, or if he was more aggressive, or if he had led a life on the run. That's Ben
Hmm.
Riley. And they're like, this is what Peter is capable of, and now you know how much he holds back.
Yeah, he is like him and Norman Osborn fight, and though
Yeah.
Norman Osborn's no slouch, he's not on the same level as Peter Parker at all. They recently had a fight where it was Norman Osborn, he became the Red Goblin for it because he got the Carnage symbiote, and it
Mm,
was Peter Parker. His last resort was he's like, "Eddie, let me use the Venom symbiote because I need something to be able to like at least keep pace with Osborn." And he kept pacing for a while. Unfortunately, being Carnage, who is just the worst thing to deal
yeah.
with ever.
Yeah.
Peter was like, "Take the suit off and fight me as you are. You can't beat me without the symbiote." And he took it off, and Peter laid into Norman
Yeah.
in the most fantastic way
Dude.
because Norman's not a slouch, but he's not literally Spider-Man, the guy
Yeah.
that can dodge like gunfire
Yeah, I like
like
when
consistently.
there's I like during like Back in Black when he breaks into that prison
Oh my
to
god, he just
beat
humiliates freaking what's his name
beat the tar out of Kingpin
in
in
front of
front of
all the
everybody.
criminals. Yes.
Just to remind them, he's like, "Look, when we're out there and I'm Spider-Man and you're whoever the fuck you are, that shit's between me and you. Any of you guys come after my family again, and this is gonna be you." Like laid out on the prison floor like a bitch in
He
front
beat
of
him. He
everybody.
beat him like a savage. He beat him like a savage animal. And
Yeah.
Kingpin was like, "God damn." He
Yeah,
came
but
in my house and
yeah,
beat my ass.
Kingpin is one of my wife's favorite villains. She really likes Wilson Fisk in general.
He's a cool
And
character.
yeah, and I told her about the thing in Back to Black. She hadn't read it. She was like, "No," and I was like, oh yeah, let me show you."
Savagely. He
Yeah,
savagely beats him to the point, it's literally to the point that Peter's just standing looking over him. Like, yo, if you do that again, if you better hope she's breathing. Because if
yeah,
she dies, I'm coming after you. And I was just
yeah.
like,
You,
wow.
you ain't walking away from it next
Such a
time.
good story. Oh my gosh. But
Yeah,
let's get to the
I
supporting characters of Spider-Man.
yeah,
Let's
and that's
think
actually a
of
good segue because a lot of those supporting characters, whenever they're put into danger, that's when you see Spider-Man kind of take those limiters off, and he really will go after someone.
he'll fight somebody a
Um,
little more seriously.
yeah, at top of the list, we got Mary Jane. Now I don't know. I haven't picked up a Spider-Man comic in a few years. I'll pick up some of the graphic novels every now and then, like the assembled trade
Hmm.
paperbacks that they have to kind of catch up on certain stories. But month to month, I haven't been buying them anymore, and I don't know what the status of Mary Jane is because she was sort of removed during Brand New Day, and then they kind of brought her back. But I remember Joe Quesada hated Mary Jane, could not stand
No clue why I hate her so much.
her.
He
Yeah.
just it's the biggest hate boner ever for her. I never got it.
Yeah. He wanted Peter to be like this eligible bachelor and stuff, and it's like, Sada, you got a thing for Spider-Man, it's fine. Like, but these two are like, an item. Like they were an iconic couple for decades.
Literally.
So what is the status of Mary Jane in the comics right now?
Okay, I have not 100% caught up with Nick Spencer's run. That's the current run we're talking about right now
Yeah.
in 2021 with Spider-Man. But I do think that him and MJ are working things out and trying to become a couple once again.
Hmm.
I knew for like I'm gonna say from like 2005 to like maybe 2018 they were not an item anymore. He started dating
Oh.
Wait, is it Trooper or Hooper? I
I,
forgot her name, but Carly Hooper, I think is her name.
yeah.
He started dating Carly, the female cop that worked in the general area. She started
Hmm.
dating her, and then I think he started having a fling again with Betty.
Oh wow. Back to
And
Betty.
yeah, back rewind again. And he was just like, I guess this is not gonna work. But yeah, I think they're trying to do things. I think they're trying it again, which it really should be going on. Because I personally think Spider-Man should age up and not be Spider-Man anymore. Peter should like eventually leave the cowl behind with Miles.
Yeah, like I kind of like the idea of him becoming like the elder Spider-Man. Like every now and then, like he's maybe he puts on the suit, but him moving into a role where he's like training, the younger Spider people,
Mhm.
and maybe even kind of like there's this kind of vague idea that I have for him that I think would be really cool, but it's hard to really um lay out in simple terms because it basically uses things from a lot of different uh, continuities and stuff to kind of assemble it. And that's did you ever read the Aranya comics when they were out?
Yeah, the Spider Girl, right?
Yeah,
Hmm.
so they get into that kind of society of the spider where you've got the hunter, the mage. He was the Spider-Man was the totem and stuff like that. And I kind of like the idea of the totem moving into a more kind of like advisory role, but not necessarily like a man in the chair kind of advisory role. Like he's the
Mm,
dude who coordinates, who understands kind of like the way to move about the web, as it
hmm.
were.
I feel what
And
you mean.
I would really like to see him kind of in that role eventually because I don't like when Marvel has characters hit a certain point and then just refuses to have them move past that point. Like it's about selling comics at that point, and it shows. It's not about telling a story. Uh, but them undoing. Mary Jane and then kind of freezing that stuff. And it's like, I didn't like that. And how they got really close to the two of them being parents
Yeah, they
in,
did.
what was that, the late 90s? And then they just backed off of it. They're like, oh no, the baby died. It was a miscarriage. And then they just never try again. Really? Like, ever? Like, that
I
seems very strange as a guy
I
who
hated it
is,
myself too. I hated I just hate the inability to allow Spider-Man to grow up as a character because I feel like this is the last chapter of him that we need before his book closes. Like it's time to let him eventually
yeah,
just be happy with MJ. Let him go off into the
yeah,
pasture and raise some kids. And I
maybe,
would like the idea of Miles always being around to be like coming to Peter and being like, "Hey, I need help
yeah.
with stuff."
We've got other Spider-Men. We've got other people with those powers. It's kind of an interesting Spider Family dynamic they have. It just let Peter be the patriarch of it.
Hmm.
Put him at the head of the table, bring him in for big events, and have the day to day stories go to the others. You
That would
know,
be perfect. I think that would be an amazing way to go about it. But I
yeah,
feel like they're too scared of losing the money that is Peter Parker's character, which sucks a ton
yeah,
because
yeah.
it just bothers me. They're not allowing my character to just go off into the
Do his
sunset
thing.
properly. Just let him
Yeah.
go. Just
And Mary Jane is a huge part of that because she was the part that was progressing it. And I think that might have been part of what Casada hated, was that by her mere existence in a relationship with him, they were inevitably moving in a direction that a lot of other Marvel couples and a lot of other Marvel characters just don't go. And the only way he could see out of that and pulling it back and all that is like, we gotta cut Mary Jane. And rather than like fridge her or kill her off or anything, he's like, I'm gonna go with this highly like convoluted story with like Mephisto and shit, and we're just gonna change the timeline a bit and completely fuck up the story in ways untold, you know, and that'll be fine, right? No,
that
because
was it was so
it's
bad.
not.
It was
It's
so
not fine.
badly done.
Yeah,
It was so funny. It was just
I
like,
stopped
what?
reading. I stopped reading Spider-Man for years after Brand New Day. I got like 5 issues into Brand New Day, and I was like, no, I'm done.
I personally love Brand New Day. That's me personally. I
Well,
think Brand New Day was very refreshing because I haven't read now look, let me get clear. I read all of the Spider-Man Essentials. I have the book, The Spider-Man Essentials, where it goes through every main story and all of the characters getting shown up. And then I read a bunch of the Clone Saga, some of the 90s Spider-Man,
yeah, I should pick
and
up the
then
essentials.
I got into um then I got into the like proper Stravinsky's run.
Hmm. Now,
Um
when
mhm,
it comes to you mentioned Betty earlier. I was really
mhm,
surprised that he went back to Betty because Betty Brant is a girlfriend he had in like what, the 60s or 70s,
like 70s,
like
60s.
way back. And so I'm surprised, like when you're like, oh yeah, he went back to Betty. I'm like, Jesus, because I mean, he had a few girlfriends before he landed on Mary Jane. There was Liz Allen, Betty Brant, Gwen Stacy, of course. Gwen Stacy is an interesting one because they keep coming back to her and
Oh my
fucking it up.
god, let's do you really want to talk about that storyline?
Oh, they fucked that up. Like the weird Gwen Stacy clone,
Oh
and then
no.
like, oh, Harry Osborn actually was like banging Gwen Stacy. It's like, but weren't they
No, it was actually
kids?
Norman who was banging
Oh yeah,
her,
yeah, yeah. Sorry,
and I
Norman,
was
not
like,
Harry. It's fucked up, and the
it
art that
was
they do for that part too is even more disturbing because they always manage to find a way to make Norman look really,
really gross and like monstrous.
yeah,
Oh Lord, it was so bad. It was so bad. I saw that comic and I was just like, oh, I was just like, oh no, don't
it's
do him like
bad.
that.
I was working at a comic shop when that came out, and they had like Gwen Stacy. What the fuck is this? So I go into it. I'm like, man, you guys do not know how to handle this character. Like she has like a very pivotal point in his history, the way Uncle Ben does. And just like Uncle Ben, they seem to forget that every decade or so and then bring him or her back.
They
And
usually try not they Uncle Ben's thing is usually they try to have a moment where he remembers Uncle Ben, but they don't like they've never straight up brought Benjamin Parker back.
there was a story, and I imagine that they had some sort of cop out. It was like some sort of merging of universes or a time thing or something. And Ben Parker pops up in Manhattan and goes looking for Aunt May. And it turns out that Aunt May at that time is seeing Jarvis from the Avengers.
Oh, okay. So that moment, I think that's a scroll moment.
Okay, that's it. So
I
that's
think that's a
probably.
scroll, or at least I know Jarvis at the time was a scroll because
Oh
that was
my
like
god.
that was Secret Invasion time. Trust me,
Yeah,
that was a
you're right.
crazy
You're right.
period of time for comics.
Yeah.
I I remember because I at that time when I was reading it was maybe like 2017 is 2015 is when I really like deep dove into comic books again. I was like, I'm going to understand all of this because I felt like being a New York City person, you have to know your comic books. Like, it's a part of our culture there. So I was
Yeah.
like, I'm gonna deep dive into this, and I read literally from Avengers Assembled all the way to Secret Wars. Like I read like 20 years of Avengers. I started reading Fantastic Four and I started reading Spider Man, and it was really weird seeing all the stuff the Avengers were talking about while Peter was a part of the Avengers, while also like coming back and forth and doing stuff with the regular team, and then come to find out Jarvis, the guy that Aunt May's seeing, is a fucking scroll who took Luke Cage's baby and ran away with it so it wouldn't get killed. And I was just like, excuse me?
The scroll stuff is always wild, but Secret Invasion really put it over the top.
It made it,
I,
I don't know if I think it was cool or not. Like
yeah,
I
it's
like
one of those
Secret
stories you
Invasion.
got to kind of sit on for a little while and kind of go back and forth on.
Like I
Um,
love it, but at the same time I'm like, what the fuck was I what was I going through?
I think the only instances of Gwen Stacy being brought back that I did not hate is how they used Gwen Stacy in Ultimate. She
Hmm.
actually lasted for a little while, and she was actually like she had a role in the story that she didn't have before. And then, of course, Spider Gwen is alternate universe Gwen. What if she got powers and stuff? I think that's a good way to go about it too. But anytime they bring her back, just Gwen Stacy in 616, which is the main continuity,
It's never good.
it's
It's never
never
great.
good. Anytime I see her fucking face, I'm like, oh, here we go. One thing I also don't like is that anytime they show her in flashbacks, they don't even bother to try and like bring the story into the present or anything. They're like, no, we're gonna depict her as she looked in the 60s. And it's like, you guys
Yeah.
realize you're showing Spider-Man having a flashback to the 60s, right? Like and being like, oh man, like why is he not an old man? Like
Oh
you
my
guys are being
god.
you guys are ridiculous. Anytime Gwen Stacy comes up, when she was in the Amazing Spider-Man movie, the Andrew Garfield one,
Hmm.
because my wife went into that sort of unprepared. You know,
Oof.
I went and I saw that in the theater with her, and she knows that Gwen Stacy dies. She knows, but she doesn't know how. She doesn't know the situation. And when they have that moment where she just like crack her skull, just like in her neck, and my wife's hands actually came up. She was like, "Oh!" And everyone in the theater was like, oh damn, they just showed that. I'm like, you have to. It has to be like that because it has to stick in your head the way it sticks in Peter's. Like there's
Yeah.
he's never gonna forget it, and now neither will you.
And the worst part of that is that she died because of Peter. That's
Yeah.
the because the well, not it's not definite, But what happened is the death of Gwen Stacy. Norman takes the blame for killing her, but what happens is that Peter doesn't even know if he did it himself because of him shooting the rope at her so hastily to grab her. He doesn't know when he pulls the rope if it snaps her neck.
Yeah, it was left super ambiguous for the longest time. I know that over the years they've gone back and forth. Like, Norman will show up and be like, "Oh no, I didn't kill her, you did," or something else will happen that'll kind of move the needle from one side to the other. But I don't think they've even today definitively said whether or not it was Norman or Peter that actually
And I
killed her.
love it. I love it. I love how much hatred Peter has towards him. This
Yeah,
like genuine like I he can't stand Norman. It's so fucking funny. The only reason why he doesn't like completely go apeshit on him every time is because that's his best friend's dad, which is another important character of Spider-Man. Harry Osborn
now, in
is
Brand New Day, did they bring them back to the point where they were good friends
oh yeah,
again?
they're bros.
Yeah,
They
yeah.
Peter, if you don't know, if you probably didn't know that, well, you might know this, I don't know. The Normie, Harry's son is actually Peter's godson.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
Yeah, that's his godchild. So he's
Yeah.
like that. They're very close again. They had their obviously they're falling out,
Hmm.
but they ended up repairing things, and now him and Norman, no, him and Harry are really really close. And he's like, "Your fucking dad. Your dad's the worst person ever." Because Norman Osborn's so evil that he somehow got control of the world. Like he became the leader of fucking Shield and made it hammer. Like he is Osborn is evil with big dreams and big plans, and it works. It's
Yeah.
crazy.
Yeah. He's. Oh man, I really, I really want to see some cool Norman Osborn stuff
In the
come to
MCU,
the MCU,
they got if they do him
but
right, I would love him. That I'd love to see Hammer in MCU.
they
That'd be
they
unbelievable.
gotta find the right guy for it, because I respect to Willem Dafoe. I think Willem Dafoe is a tough act to follow in a lot of instances. He can go from being a very like well-adjusted dude to looking absolutely batshit crazy in the blink of an eye. So he's not impossible to top. He's not the best actor in the world, but you're gonna have to get someone really good to follow that, or people are gonna shit all over it. They're
I
like you,
I wonder if they're gonna do the. You think they'll do the goblin? They have to do the goblin. That's his arch enemy.
yeah, the goblins. I mean, Harry Osborn himself was a goblin for a while.
That's true. He was a goblin. Then there was the hobgoblins, the two of
Mhm.
them or three of them technically,
Yeah,
and so I would love to see some more of that. I would love to also see some of the clones actually
who's
because
who's your favorite clone?
Kane,
Yeah,
without a
I
doubt, Kane
I
Parker
I did not used to like Kane back in the day, but
until
I
you read
picked
Scarlet.
until I got into the Scarlet
Yeah,
Spider. Like
man.
after he's got sort of that new lease on life, his face isn't all jacked up, and he's just like he's out there doing his own thing, trying to live his own life and shit. I'm like, he's not bad. Like now that he doesn't have the mullet, and he's not all like messed up. This is a pretty decent character.
I love Kane Parker so much. I love what he brings to the table.
Yeah,
I love that he
I
became one of the
liked.
Midnight Suns. You probably didn't read that story, but he when there was a period of time there was a comic book story called Damnation, where it was
Hmm,
Doctor Strange and Ghost Rider. And what happened was Mephisto erected this like fucking giant like hell casino in Las Vegas. And it was pretty much like Doctor Strange, the Iron Fist, Blade, Ghost Rider, and the Scarlet Spider because he lives in Texas.
oh yeah, yeah, he's right there. So
It was
man,
just
I'm
like
gonna have to pick that up.
it's
That sounds
so
pretty
good. It's
rad,
so
actually.
funny. It's a funny storyline
That
that I
sounds
really,
rad.
really enjoyed. And it was so funny because there was a moment in it where Kane took a moment and realized where he was at. And he was just like, yo, what the fuck is going on here? He was like, yo, I'm used to fighting like bank robbers and shit.
Yeah,
These are demons. These are
yeah,
like,
and that's coming from a dude who was a literal assassin for years.
Literal clone. Literally, it's a clone. And he just
Yeah,
took a moment to be like, yo,
this is fucked
how
up.
fucked up is fucked up? This is fucked up.
Now, I really liked my favorite for a long time was Ben Riley when he was the Scarlet Spider. Now, I've heard some things about him coming back and being a bad guy and then
Hmm.
not being a bad guy, and I don't know how I feel about that because I always thought Ben Riley was kind of like he always struck me as being like of all the fucked up clones, he was like the stable clone. You know what I mean? And I liked his role as the stable clone, as the one who was like not a complete fuck up. I mean, he still has problems, but he wasn't a complete fuck up. And then they brought him back and decided that they were going to make him a fuck up. And I'm like, I mean, I'll have to
I
read it from the beginning and then go all the way through it and then like decide how I feel about it. But some of the stuff that I've like heard and brief stuff that I've read here and there, I was like, I don't know if I like this. I don't know if I like Ben anymore. You know?
I always be partial to Ben Parker. I like the clones,
Yeah.
I am a product of the '90s, and I love me my clones. I can't
Yeah.
help it, but I um I will always have a special place in my heart for Kane because of just how angsty he is. And
Mhm.
he's like the '90s Spider-Man, like he's cooler than the rest, and he has a mullet and a really like horribly designed costume when it was like the black and purple with his
Mhm.
hair flowing in the background. I was like, this is like
Mhm.
really silly looking, but also I kind of dig this.
Yeah, it's very iconic to that time.
It's super. So I've always been like very impartial to him for the most part. I've never truly thought of the other clones because technically a bunch of clones,
Yeah, there's a bunch of
but
and all of them have been enemies of Spider-Man. I think Ben Riley was the only one that was um, kind of solidly an ally of Spider-Man. Most of the other ones were, for the most part, for a very long time, were enemies of some form or another, spawned by Jack.
yes, they
And
were.
the Jackal is one of those villains that people don't even know about. If they're kind of like, oh, I watch cartoons, I've seen these movies, and it's like they've never touched on Jack.
Never, because inherently touching a jackal is gonna have to unwind that convoluted ball of what
Yeah,
Spider-Man is. So
you
they're
you
like,
pull on that thread and it's gonna go for a while. Like
they're
you
like,
and everyone who writes Spider, everyone is so hesitant to even touch it because the Clone Saga, as much as I like it, did not do well when it first rolled out. People
because it
hated
was
the
a
Clone
mess.
Saga.
Because
It
it
was
was a
Yeah, it was a
mess.
mess, and it part of why it was a mess was because I'm kind of getting ahead of myself a little bit, but at the time they had just started to branch out the different books. You had Amazing Spider-Man, Spectacular Spider-Man, I think there was Web of Spider-Man. You had a bunch of books of Spider-Man stuff, and they were kind of focused on different aspects of Spider-Man's life. But when they did this big crossover in the 90s, they didn't have the discipline for crossovers at the time, and you had to get all of the comics for that month to follow the story. But the people who were writing those comics and penciling them and shit like that weren't getting all the same information. Everybody wasn't on the same page. The editors weren't doing a very good job of keeping them on the same page. So you got a lot of conflicting information, timelines that didn't match up, characters who were in two places at once, and shit like that. And people caught it like immediately and they called them on it and they just did not do anything about it. And in the end, they're like, no, yeah, Peter is actually the clone, but no, he's not actually the clone. All this other,
It
fucked up
was
shit people
it
could
was
play.
really a lot of fucking just a mess. It's a mess of a situation that got
Yeah.
really convoluted.
Mm.
And also it went on for way, way too long. The
Yeah, it
Clone
did.
Saga ended up being like 4 years. Like I read almost half of it, and it turns out at the end, who was up to all of it? Again, Norman Osborn. It wasn't just a
Yeah.
jackal. He was being goaded on by and it's like, what the fuck
Yeah.
is
I love,
happening?
and then you get the whole Spider Girl comic in the MC2 universe
Mm-hmm.
spins off of the what if of the the Clone Saga. It's insane. And when Bendis walks into the office, into the Marvel offices, and he tells them that for Ultimate Spider-Man he wants to do the Clone Saga, there was like an audible like ooh, because no one had any faith that he could make that story work for Ultimate.
They were like, "Are you sure?" He was just
Yeah,
like, "I'm pretty sure."
no
Like, "Are you
one wanted
positive?"
him. I'm pretty sure that him, I'm pretty sure that him getting that is basically the thing that put him on those other projects, because we've talked about this before, how Bendis is kind of like feast or famine, hit or miss. He'll
Yeah,
write stories that are fantastic, and then he'll write stories that are dog shit. And usually the ones that are dog shit are ones that he's assigned to or was specifically assigned to by Casada. And I'm convinced, even though I have no proof, this is just like, my own thing, is that he said he wanted the Clone Saga. He explained his thing. People still didn't like the idea, and he basically had to cash in chips. He was like, "Look, you let me do this. I'll do whatever. I'll do like 4 or 5 other fucking stories for you. Whatever you want. Let me do this. I got this." And they're like,
and
"Okay,
Casada was like,
but you
"Oh,
owe me.
really?
You
Oh,
owe
really?
me."
He'll do anything."
I,
Because
I,
Casada's the worst, and Joe Casada did a lot of damage to Marvel, guys. All
oh
I'm
yeah,
saying is that Casada did a lot of serious damage to Marvel comics that I will never forgive him for personally.
yeah. He's a hack, dude. He's the reason why we don't have a good Ultimate Marvel,
Yeah,
or didn't, because he's like, yo, I don't like how it's too much like 616. I'm like, it has a passing resemblance to 616. They are not alike. And he's like, no, we're nuking it, ultimatum. And I'm like, eat a dick,
well,
man.
yeah. Ultimatum was oh
Yeah.
Lord, Ultimatum was something. Ultimatum
Like, hey,
was
we should get the guy, the writer who ruined Heroes for everybody and tanked that series. We should have him write Ultimatum.
it was
That's a good idea.
Ultimatum was uh oh God, it was full
Yeah.
of so many bad points. There was
Now,
so many bad moments in Ultimatum. I was just like, yo, what's happening?
yeah. Uh, the, okay, so getting back to the villains. As far as so we got the Jackal, we got Norman Osborn, we got who do you have as your best villain and your worst villain? Like if you had to choose,
The
who's
best
your
Spider-Man
top
villain,
pick?
without a doubt, is Carnage. That
Okay,
is his peak. That is his greatest adversary villain. That's not his like his arch nemesis. His arch nemesis is obviously between Doc Ock and what's his name? Doc
Osborn.
Ock and Osborn. Those are his archetypical villains.
Hmm.
But when it comes to Carnage, I love the idea. I love the fact that Peter knows, like, I can't beat this guy.
Yeah,
Like,
Carnage
I'm
is like
not winning. I'm not winning.
he's like a force. He's like it's like trying to fight the ocean. Like you can afloat for a little while, you can swim, you can't win. it's it's
Literally,
rough.
I love it. I love it because I love how when Peter tangles with Venom, right? They're both like not trying to murder each other. But when Venom gets serious, Peter's like, "Uh oh, Sonics are fire." He just
Yeah.
goes like, "Okay, I can't keep fighting this guy for too long. He's probably gonna try to eat me." But when it's
Mhm.
Carnage, it's just straight up uh, abort mission.
Yeah.
It's like abort mission. I can't do this. If he
Yeah.
grabs me or something, like, because Carnage is just bad. He's just badness personified.
Hmm.
He's like Joker if Joker had like real powers, like something to genuinely be afraid of him
Yeah.
about.
He's chaos, and he's the worst kind of chaos. He's chaos that the spider sense can't do shit about.
Yes, that's what makes him so much more worse
Yeah.
because of the fact that there's been times that like he's just been around and Peter's like, "What are you talking about?" And then he just sees Carnage and he's like, "I can't do anything about this.
Hmm.
This guy's literally I can't. My spiders work against him. I can't outpace him. I can't outfight him. I need Sonics. I need Sonics." Someone yell really loud and help me.
And who's the villain that you absolutely hate? Every time he shows up in a book, you're like, I don't know if I can even read this.
Oh, So there's the villain. Have you played Spider-Man for PS4?
Yeah.
Speedball. Oh, I hate Speedball.
Speedball. Okay.
I
All right.
hate her. I was like, ew. Why are you here?
That's funny. Oh man, if I had to pick a favorite villain, I'm trying to think about it. Like this is my question. I still haven't really figured it out. My favorite villain, or like you said, like Green Goblin is like his iconic, and Doc Ock is iconic, but they've never been like anytime you introduce that villain into the story, you're like, okay, we're in it for a longer story.
Yeah,
This is gonna be a slow burn kind of thing. But I think Moreland
Morlun.
from
Yes.
yeah, I think he's my favorite one, and he was introduced during that Straczynski run, and he was completely new. I mean, he got a couple of other ones that he brought in, like Shathra, the Queen.
Yeah, the Queen of
Um,
the Spider Killer.
yeah, yeah, and these were all interesting villains, but Morlun was like he's the top, like for me, because he doesn't have a crazy design. He looks dignified, anachronistically, but dignified. And then he's just this fucking beast, just comes in and he's again like a force of nature, and I thought he was such a cool and interesting thing at the time when I first read that story. I haven't had another villain have that same impression on, you
I
know.
like I like how Peter was fighting Morlun and he was like doing all this to him, and Morlun was just like, I'm gonna rip your eyeball out, and he just ripped his eyeball out, and he was like,
Yeah,
did you just? He didn't. That was that little moment is so insane when they're fighting on the street, and Peter's like, did he just? He couldn't have. He couldn't. He didn't, and he eats his eyeball, and you're
yeah,
like, what the fuck? And Peter starts panicking.
yeah, because that
He
dude is
starts
here to eat you.
panicking. I remember the first moment that he sensed Morlun. He was
Yeah,
swinging through the city and he hid. He
yeah,
instinctively hid somewhere. He was like, I'm just gonna hide. And he was like, I don't know why I did that.
yeah.
Such
It's
a
crazy.
I love
I
that. I love what Morlun brought to the table.
Yeah, I have the trade paperback for that, and it's my favorite.
I have the whole
It's
entire Stravinsky run, all of
Oh
them. I have
man,
every comic he wrote in that run, from issue 1 to issue 1. Like I have the Ultimate Collection from 1 to 5. 5 having Back in Black and One More Day and all that stuff in it.
nice.
It's
I,
one of my prized possessions.
I think the villains that I hate. Trying to think of someone not necessarily who's lame, because obviously when you're thinking like lame, you kind of go to like the Shocker or the Spot.
I
I'm
hate the Spot.
trying to think of a villain that I hate, that I really don't like. That one's hard. 'Cause I'm trying to think of like his rogues gallery. Like, can't really think of one that isn't necessarily. I guess maybe Hydro Man.
Hydro Man's kind of lame.
Yeah,
I agree with you on that.
he doesn't really fit. They never really do anything with him. I feel like even the Rhino is more compelling than Hydro Man.
Yeah,
Um, yeah. Okay, so as
yeah.
as far as because we've kind of touched on some of the iconic stories and stuff, but if you had to pick your best and worst for storylines, what would it be?
Best would be Craven's Last Hunt. I think that's his best comic overall.
Okay.
If I was going to, um, if I was going to give me the worst stomach run, I would give it the Clone Saga. Honestly, just the very beginning of the Clone Saga is just so. No, no, no. The very end is just
Hmm.
really bad.
It's bad. It's
It's
really, really bad.
really bad.
It's so bad.
A lot of people say One More Day is his worst run. Now, I think One More Day is a good comic with a terrible resolution.
Okay. Yeah, I think that's probably because my pick for hated story is going to be that One More Day, Brand New Day area, but it's specifically how
It
One More Day
ends.
ends
Yeah, it's
because
horrible
the
ending.
story basically has a high stakes. There's a lot of stuff going on. You got a lot of tension, and then the way they wrap it up is just kind of like, man, that was buns. It was just dog buns.
Like, why
It's
would you do
not good.
that? Why would you do it like
Yeah,
that?
yeah. It's not good. It's yeah. All right, so that's your worst. What did you say was your favorite one?
Oh, Craven's Last Hunt.
Craven's Last Hunt. Yeah, yeah.
Oh,
I
that's iconic.
there's Yeah, my most hated one definitely One More Day. My favorite one, my favorite storyline is probably going to be that stretch with Moreland because
Hmm.
that really reignited um my passion for Spider-Man. 'Cause so growing up, I would go between kind of like stints of like, oh, I'm kind of feeling Spider-Man right now, and I would kind of fall off of like X-Men, and then yeah, Spider-Man, the story would hit kind of a rough patch either on the art or the writing, and then I'd go over to X-Men and I'd be on that for and the Straczynski bringing in Morlun and these other characters, that was the thing that grabbed me and brought me back into it. Because in general, I wasn't reading a lot of comics at the time. I was reading like Aranya, Spider Girl, and like maybe a couple other things, but I wasn't like really engaged. Straczynski comes along, throws that in there, and I'm like, I'm back into like 616 Spider. Like
I love it. I
this
love
got
Six
me.
Spider-Man. It's
I
super
I
cool.
I don't really like Superior Spider-Man,
I like
but
Superior for what it was. It was fun for a bit. Like I really enjoyed Superior for a little while. I was like, oh, this is cool. I like seeing like Doc Ock's like rendition of Peter.
yeah,
It's
I
refreshing, you know.
there's cool things in. I have like this problem with Superior Spider-Man because it's got a lot of cool stuff in it. The premise is interesting, but then there are certain parts where you have like these kind of like hand wavy moments and contrived moments where it's like Dan Slott specifically wrote in things that didn't seem feasible to me or neglected to write things that seemed feasible to me solely to stretch the story out longer than it could have. So, for instance, in any story where you have sort of a body swap scenario, you usually have someone who's like onto it, you know? Or if you have a mind sitting within another mind, most psionic people can pick up on that. You know, there's some way to detect it. They even go into the fact that Kane and Peter become incredibly close at one point, and somehow Kane thinks that Peter's sudden like 180 on
Just
him.
acting like an asshole, and he's like, "What the fuck?"
Yeah, because
They run
Octavius
into each
fucking
other.
hates
Yeah,
Kane, you know, and because I think Kane killed Octavius at some point or some shit like that. And so Octavius fucking hates him. And Kane's convinced, oh yeah, Peter hates me now. And there's so many moments like that peppered throughout the story where I'm kind of like, this doesn't make sense. Like I could see it like once, twice, but it happens over and over and over, and the story goes on for too long. And it doesn't after a certain point, it's not covering new ground. You
for
know,
me,
it's
I
just
enjoyed it a lot. Like I understand because you're talking about what you call superior Spider-Man friend or foes, where
mhm,
Kane runs into. They both
yeah.
get captured by the Jackal, and all of a sudden Peter's being a huge dick to Kane, and Kane's like, "What?"
What did I
Like
do?
a few months ago we ran into each other, and you were like, "You're my brother," and we were good, and
Yeah.
now you hate me.
And Kane just accepts it.
And he was like, "I'm
Like
leaving, I guess."
he goes off into his own comic and just mopes about it. Like, man, I guess I really am a piece of shit if Peter thinks I am. And it's like, come on. But I mean, I still think that probably I dislike One More Day more than that.
Ah man, I one more day's ending. I'll stand up for that. I stand up for that comic every time. Like
Yeah.
on my streams, people talk shit about it, and I'm like, "Did you read it? Did you read it? It's a good comic. The ending's bad."
Mm.
And everyone's like, "Nah, Sween, it's bad." And I'm like, "No,
It's
dude,
it's like
it's a
textbook tripping at the finish line,
yeah. Like
you
it
know.
just gets bad towards the end." And they're like, "Dude, look." The conversation he had with himself as a person that like the conversation like he had pretty much the visit of the three ghosts
Hmm.
essentially where it was like he saw himself if he only focused on his business aspects of his life, then he saw himself if he just continued to wallow and everything, then he met his daughter and then he spoke to literally the one above all.
Yeah,
Such a beautiful moment, and like the
yeah.
moment where he was just like, You put him on the beach, and he was like, "Where's my like? We're just on the beach, you know." It's like you want some sunscreen or something. Like it's one above all being like a deity. It's just oddly like calm when it talks. And he filled up the beach like full, a beach full of people standing shoulder to shoulder. And he was like, "These are all the people that through some way or another you have saved their life." And
Yeah.
it's just like that's such a beautiful moment.
To see the impact that you have in the world is something that very few people would ever get, you know.
And like
So
you and the creator of the the originator of the multiverse showed that to you
yeah,
because of how truly like special like you're the hero.
yeah. The more I think about it, I think I have a certain bias against One More Day because at the same time One More Day was going on, I think that was at the same time that Ultimatum was just fisting the anus of the Ultimate Universe. So it was like too much shit was coming to an end, you know, and I was just like, I can't do this anymore. Like I can't do like, and it just wasn't a good ending, you know. It
Ultimatum
just
was really bad.
yeah.
Guys, if you have not, if you have not read Ultimatum, kind of maybe don't
Yeah,
don't
maybe
read
just
Ultimatum.
just get the broad strokes because there's gonna be shit about that pisses you off. No matter what comic that you were reading going into it, it had everyone fucking hated it. You know, like oh somehow the teleporter drowns in the ultimatum wave, but the guy who flies doesn't. Like what? You know, and
It
then
was
it's like
really bad. It was really bad. And then Spider-Man died technically too.
well,
And
he
then
he he dies after because they were like, no, we're gonna kill off Peter Parker, and Bendis was like, yo, I spent so long building this, I want to kill him off on my own terms. I want to do it my way. And Casada was like, all right, so long as he's gone by end
he's
of year,
gone.
like you can do it the way you want to do it, but
He's gotta be
he
fucking
goes.
gone. And Bendis was like, "Bro, I've only done good for you. Why you fight me so much?"
Why do you not trust me on this shit? Why do you
It
yeah,
was so
it's rough.
bad.
It was rough. So do you have any final thoughts on Spider-Man? I don't want to end
Um,
on a sour note, so I want
dude.
to
Okay, final thoughts about Spider-Man. Let me see. If I could sum up Spider-Man in one, if I could sum Spider-Man up in a relatively short phrase, I would give it. He is he is what we all should aspire to be because I see Captain America as the paragon of like a good man who has a good heart who always does the right thing, you know. But Peter Parker is someone who makes mistakes, who stumbles and falls and messes up a lot along the way, but he does not let that define him. Whether he's in or out the costume, he has to struggle to pay rent, struggle to eat, you know, messes up with the girls, disappoints his family sometimes.
yeah,
But no matter what, he's always willing to try and try as hard as he can. And that's the best anyone ever could do is just try their best to help the world any way they can. And
yeah,
that is why I think that is simply why I think he is immortalized as the greatest.
yeah. A lot of people kind of latch on to that great power and great responsibility thing, and I think that is very important. Like it's a motive kind of in a way that
Hmm.
pushes him to keep trying, you know. But the ability to keep getting up and keep shooting for that thing that you know he knows exists because he there are people like Cap that he knows, you know,
Yeah,
and he keeps going for it. And the fact that he's not perfect and he hasn't gotten there yet does not stop him. So if we
at
got
all.
people who are listening to this, I'm a little older than some of the people kind of in this sphere at this point. Yeah, but if we got people who are kind of like getting feel like they're kind of getting old, you know, and feeling like man, I still haven't made it. Like it doesn't matter that you didn't make it. It matters that you keep going forward. You know.
Your story is not written yet. And
Yeah.
that's the thing. Like I myself am 27 at the moment. I'm 27 at the moment. I'm still in college trying to become a nurse, doing content creation on the side, and it's paying
Hmm.
my bills. And when I was younger, I would have thought by 27 I would have been wherever I'm going to be. But
Yep.
life throws you curveballs, you know? Throws you curveballs, and the only thing we can do in this world is no matter how many curveballs we get, just keep pushing forward slowly but surely, and you'll get to a place where you're doing as good as you can or will ever do. And that's all you can ever want.
Hmm. Yeah, I think that's a great thing to leave it on. I hope everyone who came by to listen to the episode really enjoyed it. Spider-Man is something that we're both passionate about. We've got other things like that that we'll be hitting in the future, but Spider-Man was definitely one that we were really excited to get to, and it's
Yes,
very
very much
possible
so.
we're gonna circle back around to Spider-Man over and over because we got so many characters in that universe, so many stories that we can dig into like the little bits. You know, I'm really excited for getting into that stuff. So I hope
Samesies.
everyone enjoyed this. I hope that we'll see you in the next one. All that liking, subscribing stuff, yeah, that's great. But I really just want you guys to enjoy what we're putting out and uh, share just kind of like that passion that we have for this stuff.
For sure, for sure.
All right, well then, and you got anything left to say before we wrap it up?
I think I've said just about everything I can about
I
Spider-Man
do
without
too.
making this 7 hours long. So
Yeah. Yep. All right. So, okay. We'll see you guys in the next one. You have a good one.
later, dudes.